Welcome back. You're now watching the political segment of the weekend show. Today we're discussing expectations from new cabinet ministers. Joining us to discuss this topic, we have
with us in the studio Professor Kingsley Moghalu. He was a presidential candidate of the Young Progressive Party in the 2019 general elections and former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Welcome to the political segment of the weekend show, Prof.
Thank you.
Do you think these ministers have been giving the right portfolio? I already see you smirking, so I'm sure you have quite a number to say about this.
I'm not smirking, I'm smiling.
Do you think they've been put in the right positions? Do you believe that their competency has been matched with the right ministerial positions?
No, I don't think so. I think it's quite clear that the cabinet is mostly a political cabinet, almost exclusively a political cabinet. It was informed by political considerations, rewarding people. Some would even say planning for the future politically. Some of them have already confessed that they don't know anything about their new portfolios. So, no, long story short. Yeah.
But with the ministers and the Federal Executive Council, is there actually any form of independence? Because I know even during the week you spoke about the independence of the central bank.
Yeah.
Same issue applies with the ministers.
No, it doesn't. It's different. The central
Why
bank is an institution, and the law says, that is the Central Bank Act of 2007, makes it clear that the central bank is to be independent in the performance of its mandate. Ministers work directly with the president, and they are the core part of the government. There's a reason why the central bank is a little bit separate, and that's because in the principle of central bank independence, there is a worry that if central banks are directly politically controlled, they may make decisions under the influence of politicians that may not be in the long-term economic interest of the country. The politician is thinking about a 4-year election cycle, and so he wants to look good, or she wants to look good. So that's why it is felt that central banks should be a bit separate from the day-to-day government, and that their decisions should be independent. The ministers are different. They're political servants of the president.
But I wonder how realistic that is, because the president appoints the central bank governor.
Yes.
So
yes.
how can he make decisions independent of his boss?
Yes, the president also appoints the INEC chairman. Should he tell the INEC chairman how to write election results because he appointed him?
Is it different from
but
what's happening in reality?
Well, what is happening in reality is different. But you know, I'm just trying to say that how normal societies that are doing well function. What happens in Nigeria is a very different matter. Now, the judiciary even, I mean, the president appoints the chief justice on the recommendation of the National Judicial Council. So the fact is that there are certain institutions that we recognize that in a democracy ought to be independent of daily political control. The judiciary is one, electoral commissions are one, the central bank is one. So that's the reason. It's because of the nature of the function. It's not because of anything. So the fact that the president appoints doesn't necessarily mean that on a day-to-day basis he ought to be the oga at the top, because is that in the interest of the economy or the rule of law or, you know, democracy? That's the thing. That's, you know, we need to understand the role of institutions and you know, why there are checks and balances with for absolute power by the leader of the executive branch of government. So, you know, but in countries where people are used to despotic power, then people cannot conceive in their mind, but the president is the guy at the top. How can you say the central bank should be independent? But the law says so. And there's a reason why the law says so.
So, Prof, now we have ministers, and so they're here to stay.
Yes.
What, in your own opinion, what will make them work and work right for the progress and development of the country in the next 4 years?
Well, the president has given them a mandate, minister's mandate. So it's a question of performance management, you know, measuring people every 3 months or so, or every 6 months, to see how far you have, you know, achieved the tasks set out for you and how well you have actually done it. This requires, first of all, a knowledge of public policy. It requires also political will to do the right thing. The president has never been known to sack anybody. So let's see if he's going to, in his mid-70s, start sacking people who don't perform well.
The last time you were here, you were running for president.
Yes.
Unfortunately for you, you lost at the polls.
Not for me, for Nigeria.
Well, Nigerians made their choice
Exactly.
at the poll, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, fortunately or unfortunately for Nigerians,
Yes.
you lost at the polls, and
Yes.
you're here today speaking about the the formation of the ministerial cabinet of the present administration. You've mentioned that you don't think the right people have been put in the right places. 14 ministers were returned because the president considered them to have done a great job. The Minister of Power Works and Housing, who is now the Minister of Just Works and Housing, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Transportation, and a plethora of other people. Do you believe or do you agree with the president that these people have transformed the sectors that they manage effectively?
Well, first of all, I really don't want to talk about individual ministers. I simply would prefer to comment on the cabinet as a whole. It has very few women. There were 15 women in the last cabinet, now there are 7 women. There are no youth in this cabinet. That's 70% of Nigeria's population. When you combine the young people and the women, you're looking at almost 80, 90%. It's quite, so therefore to me, the cabinet composition seems to look to the past, not to the future. You talked about the people, how they voted. How informed is voting in Nigeria? Our political culture is not yet developed, and that's why people like myself came into politics, to say we shouldn't be electing people just because they can come and sing and dance or appeal to tribal sentiment or ethnic sentiments. It's now time for visionary leadership that understands, what it takes for the economy to grow and to take people out of poverty. That is Nigeria's #1 problem. And I don't see how this cabinet is really equipped to address the #1 problem of Nigeria's economy and poverty in this country. So that's we are responsible for who we bring into office. Somebody said, an American ambassador, former ambassador, said the other day that Nigerians always complain about their leaders, that something is wrong with their leaders, this or that. Well, the truth is that something is wrong with every Nigerian. Because if something or the other is not wrong with us, we will not be electing people who 60 years after independence, all we have achieved in reality is that we are now the poverty capital of the world. So it's down to us and how we decide on who we elect and all that. The elections reflect the place where Nigerians are at this time. And of course, we respect that as a democratic choice. But whether or not it's the best democratic choice, that's why I would say it's not unfortunate for me, because I have a job outside politics and I'm not a career politician. I have something to offer. So no, it's not a personal loss to me. I think it's a loss for Nigerians.
Well, I think that's all we can take on this segment. Thank you so much, Prof, for your time. Coming back, we're still on the political segment. We have 2 people reacting to what Professor Moghalu has said in the past few minutes. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on the political segment of the Weekend Show. Welcome back. Still on the topic of the ministerial inauguration, we have joining us in this second segment.
We have with us Ariyo Atoye, who's a human rights activist and Executive Director, Adopt a Goal for Development Initiatives. Welcome to the Weekend Show.
Well, thank you for having me, and happy birthday in advance.
Thank you, Ariyo.
Thank you.
We also have a very good friend, an activist, a politician, and an entrepreneur, Simi. Welcome to the Weekend Show.
Thank you for having me.
Simi, let's start with you. We can't talk about the formation or the effectiveness of the presidential cabinet without talking about individual portfolios and ministries. As you just watched, we had Professor Moghalu on the program who talked about the holistic effectiveness of the president's cabinet. He felt that square pegs have been put in round holes, so they're not, the people who have been appointed are not effective enough for their ministries. I want you to talk about some of the ministers that have been returned. Out of the 14 ministers, who do you believe particularly has been able to understand and grasp the full weight of their portfolio? And what achievements do you believe have been most effective to the daily lives of Nigerian people?
Thank you very much. I think it's important to note that politics, governance, what we can judge is by results. It's be very hard to take apart each one with the time frame that we have and say, but I think we can see that there was a major boost in works and housing. There's some things that have been set in motion, but with like agriculture, you sow some things in the ground, you won't be able to appreciate them until harvest period. So some things in the power sector over the next few years, you'll begin to see those things that were put in place, simplifying the discos and the gencos, going back to how the contracting was made in the first place, adding the power segments that had been stale for over 30 years, such as Mambila. If you look at the economy, we're struggling. It's difficult to say, oh, we've done fantastic, because we just we limped out of a recession and weak growth at like about 2%. But again, I believe that there's certain things that have been put in place, both from the CBN, if you look at the loan to ratio thing that the banks' policies have been put in, forcing the banks to ensure that more entrepreneurs and the population have access to credit and financing, just like we saw in Kebbi State and all over the country, how millionaires were made in the rice revolution, in the rice production. So there's some things that we've seen now. There's a lot of things that we won't see until time. But I think as a whole, you can't play a football match with very low morale. So I think I would rather stray on the end of hoping against hope and believing that I don't believe about square pegs and round holes. Ministers are largely managers, right? So it's more the technocrats. You can outsource the capacity you need to ensure that your ministry works. So I think it's more about performance management, the KPIs that each ministry has been given. We, the public, understanding what those KPIs are, the priorities of the government, and putting that pressure where it should be, ensuring that it's not waiting for 100 days. We're not waiting for 180 days. We're not waiting for 1 year anniversary. We're like putting that pressure on a monthly basis.
Ariyo, so 83 days after taking oath of office, the president announced the cabinet and shared their portfolio. And we've heard a lot about education being a priority in the next 4 years. It was reported that 1.3 trillion has been spent on education. However, just last year, Nigerian universities were on strike for about 3 months. Same minister has been returned to the same portfolio. What do you think should be the priority of the ministers, and what ministries should take priority in the next 4 years?
Well, thank you very much. And I think what is very, very important is the vision of the administration, and what are those things that you want to use this appointment to achieve. In America, we have a president who's talking about the economy all the time, and probably has his vision cut out based on some of those parameters. In Nigeria here, we're talking about some of these ministers' return without necessarily making much impact on the first 4 years. Now, 14 of them thereabout have been returned. Our education, which in reference here is particularly still in shambles, and totally uninspiring from leadership and administration point of view. And I have not seen even the president taking leadership here. And also, it's very important that we cannot continue to say that simply because ministers are managers, are administrators, there is no need for us to talk about area of specialization. So we have to learn from other climes.
So what would you prioritize?
Yeah, no, what I'm saying here is that we have to learn from other climes. The reason why some people said we should have ministers with portfolio before they are screened is simply because so that the National Assembly are able to ask questions, so that Nigerians are able to make informed decisions, including advice on the president appropriately. What this administration should prioritize is possibly something very important. You know, you are losing grounds on insecurity, you're losing ground in terms of poverty, all sorts of things. So what should be the thinking of this administration should be something like economic revolution. If you look at what the current Emir of Kano State, including some other person that said when at the onset of this Boko Haram, when Boko Haram became so tough for us under Jonathan's administration, they identified socio-economic issues as part of the things that we should address. And former President Olusegun Obasanjo talked about the carrot and stick approach to fighting it, that look, we can't take away the fact that, look, a lot of today we're also discussing on your social media segment about 80 Nigerians who are also facing trial, probably going to face trial in the United States of America. Now all these they all boil down to issue of what? Issue of economy, that we are losing the capacity to feed our people, losing the capacity to develop our country. Things are going down for us as a nation. So what that means is that the priority of the government in terms of the cabinet should have been how to use economic revolution to solve issue of insecurity, to address poverty, to address almost everything. Everything is tied to how you are able to use just one vision to be able to address numerous problems. And that should be the vision for the administration, including even addressing issue of education. You know, all these things are one way intertwined and interconnected. And that's how you develop your vision as a president in terms of the kind of a theme you bring on board. You should not allow political exigency to box you into all this arena with the kind of caliber of the minister. Like Prof said before you do, and Nigerians should know, the only thinking of this administration is how to retain power in 2023 for the APC. And that's why when you look at the pattern of the ministers they brought, these are men who want to come and play big politics. And going forward, the only thing Nigerians are going to see is big politics.
Well, they have 4 years to prove themselves.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
At that point, we'll talk about.
You know, we've said it here. We've said it here. So in the next 1, 2, 3, 4 years, you'll be reviewing whatever we've said there. That look, that's the vision of the administration. You're talking about administration the second term. You saw what Obasanjo did in the second term. You know, they did a lot of politics in the first term, but second time he brought men who were working and people were talking about needs, talking about performance. Okojanwala, all of them, they were balling. You know, here we're talking about a second term of a president. You are bringing all these former governors who couldn't achieve in their state, who couldn't do much, including some of them that you said you have accused, your administration had previously accused of corruption and ineptitude.
But you would, Ariyo, let's not get political,
no,
too political.
I'm not
but you would agree
political.
that the past administrations, whether it's Jonathan or Yar'Adua or Obasanjo, all of them have been guilty of putting political associates in ministerial in their ministerial cabinet. So I think we should actually focus more on the process of appointing ministers. You mentioned a very salient point a short while ago, the inability of the executive arm of government, particularly the president, to send to the Senate the list of ministers attached with their portfolios, I think is the genesis of the underperformance that we've seen in the past 20 years.
Yeah, it doesn't start with this administration.
Exactly.
It's been there since 1999. People have said it consistently. We're thinking the administration was going to listen, but also they have also followed the path of the old without doing the needful. But we will continue to talk and speak about it because that's what we think should happen. Now, I'm not trying to honestly blame the administration. We have to give the ministers some benefit of doubt. But the only thing is that as an analyst sometimes, it's good for us to let Nigerians to understand that, look, don't trouble yourself about what your expectations from what, if they're able to surprise you, good and fine, but don't trouble yourself about what is coming. Give them a benefit of, yes, it's true.
I see Simi laughing.
Yes.
Talk to me about this. And how do we go about ensuring, how do we change this process to ensure that people are matched with their right portfolios? That we saw Festus Keyamo, SAN.
Being questioned on legal issues.
Exactly. He thought maybe he was going to be giving the portfolio of the Attorney General of the Federation, and he was giving Minister of State of the Niger Delta. So Nigerians feel like they wasted their entire time watching that screening because it just, right now, as we've seen, it just doesn't make sense. So how do we mobilize and ensure that the president further on is ensuring that he's sending the portfolio of these people that he has nominated to the Senate for screening, that we ensure as people also that when we're watching that these people are matched with their competencies moving forward?
Okay, allow me to turn your question on its head, because I believe this is a political segment and politics is local. And I believe what we see at a federal level is always a mirror of what is going on the local level. So, for instance, if you say there's no youth and there's the gender balance in the cabinet is poor, I wouldn't argue with that. You know, res ipsa loquitur, the evidence speaks for itself. If you look on the local level, in your local government chairman, in your ward level executives, they're typically made up of old men, very few women. When you do find women, they're women leader or assistant women leader. You go on the state level, the commissioners, the same thing. So, and the governors also were replicating this whole thing of literally how many governors appointed the commissioners, announced the list of commissioners, and only added the portfolio like weeks after. So, again, I think if we always focus on the top, we have to have both a bottom-up and top-down approach if we're really going to fix our problems in this country. And a lot of the times, because the top is the most visible, so that's when we cry and scream. But we need to start crying and screaming from the ward, from the LGA level, from the state level, and at some point we will begin to mirror positive things as opposed to mirror negative things, where exclusion, where there's this idea of I am holding my list to my chest. Because it's happening on the low. Chairman, what are we doing today? I'm holding my meeting notes to my chest. What is that? You know, so I think if we start asking for accountability, you know, from both the lower level, and it begins to cascade and almost become like a domino effect. The inevitable future will not be what we're talking about 20 years from now. Our reality now will not be our inevitable future 20 years from now. And I think that's where we need to actually, the media has a responsibility to also shed lights on the lower levels of government that are closer to the people. So if on the lower level, you know, there's no woman, or there's one commissioner or two commissioners, then you could say that the federal level, they've tried to give you 7. You know, so it's not, I'm not excusing bad behavior, but I'm just saying we do need to dial back. And if you use the word process, we need to really redesign our politics to be more inclusive from the get-go. So when you say they're providing loyalty to political people, and okay, why do technocrats always sit in the house, wait for when everything is perfect, and then want the jobs? Technocrats, just like they are in the developed world or democracies that we enjoy, let them also get involved in the process, because people literally say, okay, I want to handle immigration, or I'm going to follow McCain, or I'm going to get involved in their campaign. Here we wait, we hedge our bets. In fact, most are even outside the country and expect to be called back as technocrats that have the perfect expertise for the cabinet.
Simi, I think we've run out of time for this segment.
Let me just add this in a minute, and I think going forward, it's also very important for we Nigerians to ensure that, look, we have to put our leaders to task. 2023 is coming. Any president who is not going to send a minister with cabinet as a part of the indices, some of the demands we have to make, but I think there is no time.
Thank you very much.
Guys so much. Ariyo, Simi, thank you so much for your time. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Weekend Show NG on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back on The Weekend Show. Thank you so much for investing your time with us today on The Weekend Show. Helping us to sign out, we have Abudel Voice. Take it away.
All right, thank you very much. Where you lead, I will follow. What you say, I will do. You're my strength, when I'm weak, oh Lord. And forever I will trust in you. When you lead, I will follow. What you say, I will do. You're my strength, when I'm weak, oh Lord. And forever I will trust in you. 'Cause I believe in you, I believe in you, I believe in you, oh Lord, and forever I will trust in you. Oh, I believe